Imagine dropping off your child at school, only to realize the people deciding what they learn, how they are tested, and even what medical treatments they receive aren't you, and the battle for who does have that power is tearing the country apart.
It really is. I mean, we are seeing a total fracture in who actually controls the roughly 90% of American kids sitting in public classrooms right now.
Exactly. The tug-of-war is massive, and it's happening simultaneously in, multiple states. Let me just pull a few facts from our sources to show you the scale of this.
Oh, yeah, the state level stuff is wild.
Right. So in Idaho, lawmakers just passed a law basically banning schools from using taxpayer-funded payroll system to collect teachers' union dues.
Just completely cutting off that mechanism.
Yeah. And then meanwhile, over in Oregon, a teachers' union is launching this all-out political war against Democrats. Like, they secured a $1.5 billion tax hike for education, but the state's reading scores plummeted to rock bottom anyway.
And now they're just fighting any attempts at reform.
Exactly. And in Maine, a middle school gave birth control to girls as young as 11 and 13 years old without even notifying their parents.
Wow. You put those three events side by side and you really see the entire landscape of this conflict.
You really do.
Because these aren't just like isolated local news stories. They represent a fundamental breakdown in trust. I mean, for decades, the public education system operated on this basic agreement, right, between parents, the government, and the teachers.
Right.
But today, that agreement is just in pieces. And we have think tank reports, conservative commentary, a Harvard Kennedy School paper on future federal policy, and all this on-the-ground reporting to help us unpack this great schism in American education.
So welcome to the deep dive. Yeah. To really understand this chaos, we have to look at the catalyst first. Like, the entire landscape shifted because parents started feeling like a government monopoly essentially replaced their authority.
Yeah, and the conservative viewpoint centers entirely on this loss of parental rights.
Right.
They argue that bureaucrats and teachers' unions have basically subverted the role of the family. The conservative commentary from Albert Mohler highlights this fascinating historical flip.
Oh, the 1892 thing.
Exactly. If you look back at the 1892 Democratic National Convention, their platform fiercely defended freedom of education. Like, they explicitly protected parental rights from state interference.
Wow, that is quite the flip.
Yeah. Over the last century, that dynamic totally inverted. As the government standardized public education, the state took on this massive role in dictating the values taught in the classroom.
Which brings us straight back to that situation in Maine. I mean, when a school health center provides contraceptives to an 11-year-old girl without calling her parents, that is mechanical failure of trust for conservative critics.
Definitely.
It takes this abstract philosophical argument about state control and makes it incredibly physical and real.
Right. It acts as proof for critics who say the system deliberately pushes parents out of the picture. And, when trust breaks down at that level, the conservative strategy shifts. Shifts how? Well, they stop trying to reform the public school system and just focus on escaping it. They call this strategy universal choice.
Oh, right. I see the numbers here in our sources. Since 2022, 17 different states passed laws letting families use their public tax dollars to pay for private schooling.
Yeah, they're essentially turning education funding into a backpack.
A backpack.
Yeah, so the money goes into the backpack, and the student carries it to whatever school the parents choose, public, private, or charter.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this state-level push is creating the blueprint for federal action. The Harvard Kennedy School paper details a massive initiative for Donald Trump's potential second term, which is completely dismantling the U.S. Department of Education.
Okay, wait, let's unpack that. How do you actually dismantle a massive federal agency? Like, you don't just erase the building. What happens to the billions of dollars the department hands out to public schools every single year?
So the plan relies on a mechanism called block grants.
Block grants.
Right. Right now, federal education money comes with a total maze of strings attached. If a local school wants federal dollars, they have to follow specific federal mandates on everything from standardized testing to civil rights policies.
Okay.
The conservative plan strips those mandates away. The federal government would hand states a lump sum of cash, that's the block grant, and basically tell the state governments to manage it themselves.
Just here's the money, you figure it out.
Exactly. They even plan to move the management of those grants out of education entirely, like handing it over to other agencies like the Department of Health and Human Services.
Wow. And alongside that, the sources outline something called the Educational Choice for Children Act, or the ECCA.
Right, the ECCA.
This is a $10 billion plan. They want to offer federal tax credits to fund scholarships. Basically, they're trying to double the number of students using non-public school choice nationwide.
Yeah, it accelerates that universal choice strategy on a national level. The goal is to aggressively shrink the federal footprint and build this completely decentralized market for education.
So the conservative plan isn't just to tweak the reading curriculum. It's like taking a massive utility monopoly and breaking it up into 1,000 small companies so parents can shop around for their power.
That's a really good way to look at it.
But if you blow up the Department of Education and remove all the federal mandates, who actually makes sure the kids are learning how to read and do math?
Well, that exact question forms the core argument of the group fighting the hardest to keep public education intact.
The teachers' unions.
Exactly. If the conservative movement wants to break the monopoly apart, the unions operate as the defensive wall trying to hold the traditional system together.
And the sources show unions are under immense pressure right now. I mean, teachers are facing huge class sizes, the daily squeeze of inflation, and a severe lack of disciplinary tools to keep classrooms safe.
Oh, absolutely. They see themselves as the last line of defense for educators. And they also view the root cause of student failure entirely differently than conservatives do. Unions argue that when a student struggles to read or do math, the failure usually stems from poverty, not bad teaching.
Like, you cannot teach a child who comes to school hungry or homeless.
Exactly. And this is why unions champion something called the community school model.
Meaning they want the school to act as a hub for social services, right?
Yeah.
Like adding health clinics, housing support, and food banks directly into the school building.
Yes. They believe you have to fix the community's poverty before you can fix the test scores.
Which makes sense.
It does, and that belief drives their fierce opposition to standardized testing. From the union perspective, standardized test scores just track a family's income level.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you test a wealthy suburb, the scores are high. If you test a low-income neighborhood, the scores are low.
Yeah.
They argue that judging a teacher based on raw test scores unfairly penalizes educators who take on the hardest jobs in the poorest areas.
Okay, but the critics read that exact same data and come up with a different term: vetocracy.
Right, vetocracy.
They look at the massive political power unions hold and argue they use it to veto any real change. Like, the sources point out that teachers' unions dedicate 98% of their political donations to Democrats.
That is a lot of financial weight.
It is.
Yeah.
And that gives them the leverage to block charter schools and block new curriculum standards. Critics say unions just protect the status quo even when schools are literally failing.
Yeah, the vetocracy argument essentially suggests that the system exists to protect adult jobs rather than educate children.
I have to play devil's advocate and challenge that narrative, though. The data shows states like Massachusetts and New Jersey have incredibly powerful teachers' unions.
They do.
But they also boast some of the top-tier student outcomes in the entire country. So doesn't that prove a strong union does not automatically equal failing students?
It definitely proves how complex this is. Like, in Massachusetts, you have a strong union, sure, but you also have strict, centralized state standards and high accountability tied directly to funding.
Okay, so there's a balance.
Exactly. The union power is balanced by rigorous oversight. The problem we're seeing right now is that in places like Oregon, that balance just collapsed.
Right.
The union power grew, but the academic outcomes completely fell apart.
Yeah, Oregon's a fascinating flashpoint in our sources. Yeah. Let's trace the mechanics of what went wrong there. Because in 2019, the Oregon Education Association, the OEA, lobbied for and secured a record $1.5 billion annual tax increase specifically dedicated to education.
Which is just a staggering influx of capital for one state's public school system.
Huge. But look at the return on that investment. Today, despite that billion-dollar injection, Oregon ranks dead last in the entire nation for fourth-grade reading.
Dead last.
Yeah. The funding went way up, but the foundational skills plummeted.
And that academic failure actually triggered a financial crisis inside the union itself, partly because of a major Supreme Court ruling known as the Janus decision.
Oh, right. Before Janus, public school teachers often had to pay union dues or, like, agency fees just to keep their jobs, even if they didn't want to join the union.
Right. But the Supreme Court struck that down, ruling that forcing teachers to pay those fees violated their free speech.
Which gave teachers an exit door.
Exactly. When Oregon's reading scores plummeted and frustration really grew, teachers started opting out. The OEA lost 10,000 members.
Wow. 10,000.
Yeah. And because those dues vanished, the union suddenly faced a $5 million budget deficit.
A massive loss of members and a multi-million-dollar hole. How did the union leadership even respond to that kind of existential threat?
Well, they went on the offensive. To prove their power and, justify their existence to the remaining members, the union organized major disruptive strikes in cities like Portland and Albany.
Okay.
But they also pulled off this wild legislative maneuver. They successfully pushed the state to pass a first-in-the-nation law that allows striking teachers to collect unemployment benefits.
Wait, let me break down the mechanics of that. Usually, if you choose to walk off the job to strike, you don't get paid.
Right, that's the point.
And that financial pressure forces both sides to reach a deal quickly. But under this new Oregon law, striking teachers can just collect unemployment checks.
Yep. It effectively shifts the financial burden of the strike off the union and directly onto the taxpayers who fund the unemployment system.
That is wild.
It is. And the OEA is using that leverage aggressively. I mean, they are even targeting their own historical allies. The union is currently running a campaign to unseat Jane Solomon, a Democratic state senator.
Why? What did she do?
Simply because she proposed reforms to how school funding gets distributed.
Wow. So let me get this straight. We have a situation where the union secures a massive tax hike, the students hit the absolute bottom in reading proficiency, the teachers start leaving the union, and the union's response is to orchestrate strikes subsidized by the public while attacking lawmakers who want reform.
That's the situation.
You can easily see why the universal choice movement is gaining ground. I mean, you can see why a frustrated parent would demand to take their tax dollars and just walk away.
The trust is just gone. And if you want to see the mirror image of Oregon, look across the border to Idaho.
Right, Idaho.
Idaho lawmakers looked at the power of the unions and decided to dismantle it structurally.
They passed House Bill 516. It completely blocks schools from using taxpayer-funded payroll systems to collect union dues. And it also makes it illegal to pay teachers for any time spent on union activities during the workday.
Yeah, they cut off the union's easiest collection mechanism. Like if an Idaho teacher wants to pay union dues now, they have to set up a separate bank transfer on their own time.
Which adds friction.
Exactly. It adds friction, which inevitably drops union revenue and weakens their political power.
Okay, so we have conservatives fighting to leave the system with vouchers on one side, and we have unions aggressively defending the current structure despite falling scores on the other.
Right.
That dynamic traps centrist Democrats right in the middle. They are trying to thread an impossible needle.
The political bind for centrists is incredibly tight right now. They rely heavily on the unions for campaign donations and, ground-level political organizing.
Yeah.
But they also face moderate voters and parents who are furious about the falling test scores and are demanding change.
To solve this, the sources indicate centrists are pushing a strategy called public school choice.
Yeah. They want to offer parents options without letting the money actually leave the public system.
So advocating for expanding charter schools and creating specialized magnet programs.
Yes. Centrists argue this satisfies the parents' demand for choice, but it outflanks the Republican push for private vouchers.
Because they actively argue that Republican voucher programs often end up subsidizing affluent families who already plan to send their kids to expensive private schools anyway.
Exactly.
So it's basically like, keep the kids in the public house, but let them change rooms.
That analogy captures the goal perfectly. Keep the funding under public oversight. But to make that work, the centrists also have to broker a compromise on standardized testing.
Right, because the unions hate the testing.
Exactly. Centrists know they need to track accountability, so they refuse to abolish statewide tests completely. However, to satisfy progressive activists and the teachers' unions, they want to change how success is measured.
Right. They want to shift away from raw scores and focus on student growth metrics instead.
Think about how this changes a teacher's evaluation. Imagine a teacher gets a 5th grade student who currently reads at a 2nd grade level.
Okay.
By the end of the year, the teacher works incredibly hard and gets that student up to a 4th grade reading level.
Under a raw score system, that student still failed the 5th grade test, and the teacher is penalized.
Exactly. But under a student growth metric, the system recognizes that the teacher moved the student forward 2 entire academic years in a single 9-month span.
Oh, I see. The teacher is rewarded for the growth, even if the student hasn't hit the arbitrary finish line yet.
Right. Policy experts say if centrist Democrats and unions can agree on this kind of metric, they might finally shed their reputation as defenders of a broken status quo.
But they are really racing against the clock here. The conservative movement is passing voucher laws rapidly, and the unions are just entrenching their defenses.
The window to build that middle ground is closing fast. Very fast.
So what does this great schism mean for you, the listener? Like, why should you follow the mechanics of block grants, union dues, and student growth metrics?
Because you're paying for it.
Exactly. Whether you have a child sitting in a classroom right now, whether you pay local property taxes, or whether you just care about the competence of the future workforce you are financing this war.
Yep.
The direction your community takes will not be decided in Washington. It will be decided by your vote and by who you put on your local school board. You decide whether your town embraces universal choice, defends the union-backed traditional model, or tries to force a compromise.
You know, the shift toward local control is really the defining trend in our sources. But it leaves us with one incredibly difficult question to consider.
What's that?
Well, if the conservative vision ultimately succeeds, if we completely dismantle the federal Department of Education, remove the safety net of federal mandates, and rely entirely on engaged parents shopping around for the best private or charter schools.
Yeah.
What happens to the children whose parents are simply too overwhelmed, absent, or disadvantaged to make a choice at all?
Oh, wow.
When the federal floor disappears, who catches the kids left behind in the empty classrooms?
Yeah, that is the multi-billion-dollar question right there.
Yeah.
We started today talking about who controls the classroom. It turns out, figuring out who should control it and how we protect the most vulnerable students while doing it is the hardest test we face. Thank you for diving into these sources with us today. Keep asking questions about where your local tax dollars are going, and we will catch you on the next Deep Dive.